I'm going to start us off. We'll all read it together. Proverbs 3, verse 27 to 29 says, "Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due when it is in your power to do it. Do not say to your neighbor, 'Go and come again. Tomorrow I will give it,' when you have it with you. Do not plan evil against your neighbor who dwells trustingly beside you." I don't know why the quality is so bad. Don't ask me. But this is an interesting proverb. When I first saw that this was what I was going to be teaching on, I was like, where do I go with this? Because it's pretty straightforward. I mean, it's don't withhold good from those to whom it is due. But what I want to emphasize tonight and really talk about is there's 2 points. And the first point being this. When I read this, the first thing I wonder is, well, what does it actually mean? Who is my neighbor? I'm not supposed to plan evil against my neighbor. I'm supposed to do good to my neighbor. So who is that? Is it literally the two people that live on either side of my house? Or what? And so if we look in Scripture, in Luke chapter 10, if we could get that one up there, we are going to find out that someone else actually asked Jesus this exact same thing. You know what? Y'all can be seated. I'll just read this one. It's kind of long. So starting in verse 25, "And behold, a lawyer stood up to put him," speaking of Jesus, "to the test, saying, 'Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?' He said to him, 'What is written in the law? How do you read it?' And he answered, 'You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and you shall love and your neighbor as yourself.' And he said to him, 'You have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live.' But he," the lawyer, "desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, 'And who is my neighbor?' Jesus replied, 'A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii, 2 days' wages, and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back.' Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers?" He said, the one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said to him, "You go and do likewise." So the first thing I want to do is give some context. I'm sure most of y'all have heard this story. I'm not really going to say much new tonight, but I do want to iterate something that's important. The first point I want to bring up is what exactly this whole Samaritan-Jew conflict is. So we can assume, and it's pretty clear, that the man who was walking and was beaten was a Jew. And the Samaritans and the Jews, especially in Jesus' day, did not get along. I have a map, if we could put that up. So it's quick Israel history lesson. There was a time when Israel was all one big 12-tribe nation, and bad stuff happened. Therefore, they were split. And we have 10 tribes who stayed in the top, which is Israel, and 2 tribes who went down to Judah. Now, Israel proved to be very wicked, and God sent the Assyrians, and they came and basically exiled all those Jews that were living in Israel. Now, of course, not literally every single Jew was gone, practically. There were a few Jews that remained in Israel. And so the king of Assyria, seeing that he had this huge chunk of land that was now pretty much deserted except for a few Jews, sent back a bunch of people from his kingdom to go and fill this land up. And so the Jews intermarried with these foreigners, and that's where the Samaritans come from. Now, the reason the Jews did not like the Samaritans was because, well, one, let's be honest, they were kind of racist and prejudiced. And the reason why is because these half-Jew, half-Assyrian new people, these Assyrians brought in all their pagan gods, all the false idols, blah, 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 the nasty stuff. And they intermixed with the Jews, and the Jews who were living in Israel didn't reject it. They incorporated that and made this new, similar-looking but truly different religion. And I'm not saying that gave anyone grounds to be racist, but that's the reason why. So the Jews who were living in Judah were not friendly with the Samaritans who now lived in that northern half. So I just think this parable is very interesting because if you put yourself in the Jewish man's shoes, the lawyer, you're hearing this story, we get this man gets beat up, he's on the side of the road, and a priest walks by. Like, wow, what are the odds that a priest walks by? That's like the dude who's connecting the people to God. Like, how lucky is this guy? Surely he's going to help him. And he sees him from a distance, and he walks on the other side of the road. And similarly, a Levite. If you don't know, Levites were the tribe of Israel that were selected to work in the temple. And same situation. It's like, okay, priest didn't do anything, but thankfully we have a Levite. These guys work in the temple. Surely they love God. Surely this guy's going to help. Same situation. He passes by on the other side of the road. Samaritan walks by. That guy's definitely not going to help. This guy's done for. We've got a Samaritan walking by. And as you all know, of course, the Samaritan stops by and helps. That's nothing new. I think one quick side note that's interesting. So by this time, Israel had formed a lot of oral tradition or commands and regulations and rules that were not written in God's word that they kind of just made up as they went. And both the priest and the Levite had this oral tradition. And now in this oral tradition, it said it's okay to touch someone with blood because in the Torah, the Bible, the first 5 books, if you touch someone with blood, that makes you ceremonially unclean. But these two, the priest and the Levite, had a provision that said it's okay to touch someone with blood as long as you're saving their life, if they're dying or injured. They literally had provision to do this. The Samaritan, on the other hand, they only have 5 books of the Bible, and that has nothing to do with saying you can touch someone that's bleeding if they're dying or injured. So he had even less reason, not only because he was just a Samaritan, but also his own book of law said don't touch blood. Yet he went over to this half-beaten man and he touched him. And not only did he touch him, he put him on his own animal. He showed the true love of a neighbor. And so what this is showing us in the most simple lesson that we can get from the story is your neighbor is not just your friend. Your neighbor is not your family, just your family. Your neighbor is even the people that you don't like, even the people that hate you and the people that scorn you, the people that have different religious beliefs than you. We're not called to shy away from them. We're called to love them. That doesn't mean we compromise truth, but we do need to love them. I want to bring up a verse. This is from the book of Luke as well. It's from chapter 6, if we could get that. So Jesus is speaking here. He says, if you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And so I think one extreme point that we can, you just got to go there. He seems to be the guy that gets brought up every time you bring up evil extremes, but Hitler had family members, and I'm sure he loved them. I'm sure Hitler loved his mom, and I'm sure Hitler loved his dad. What good is that? It's so easy. It's easy to love the people that love you. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. But love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. And your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and to the evil. So this not only brings up the fact that, man, we should be loving those that don't like us. And not even just, let's get past that. It's not just people that hate us. It's also people that you just have indifference towards. People that have different, hobbies or passions. People that you pass by in school and you're like, okay, that kid's weird. You're called to love him the exact same. Like, let's not pretend like we don't have people we think are weird. Everyone does. We're still called to love them. But another thing that this seems to bring up is what it actually looks like to love those people. I think the Good Samaritan does a really good job at this. The Good Samaritan sees the man on the side of the road, and he doesn't just go up to him and he's like, yo, what's up, man? Like, how'd this happen? No, he goes up to him. He pours oil and wine on his wounds. He binds up his wounds. He puts the man on his own animal. That's like the equivalent of taking a bloodied up dude and putting him in your passenger seat with your nice fabric seats. They're stained forever. And he takes him to an inn, stays the night with him, leaves the next morning, but before he leaves, gives 2 days' wages, which, that's a good amount of money, especially for us at our age, and then says, to the innkeeper, any more that you spend on this man, I'll come back and I'll repay you even that. Raise your hand if you've done that before. Man, y'all suck. No, I'm just playing. I haven't done that. That's not common whatsoever. But we're seeing here, man, love does not look like what our culture's definition of love is. Love in our culture is just seen as acceptance, as seen as giving someone a pat on the back for whatever they believe. That's not what love is. Love is action. Love is a verb. I'm sure your parents have told you that before. Love cannot just be pity. I think another great verse comes from the book of James, chapter 2. This says, if a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warmed and filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? Just imagine, for example, if you were homeless and someone walks by you and they're asking you for money and you're just like, hey, God bless you. It's like, man, whoever God that you're serving doesn't seem very compassionate, doesn't seem very nice. And that's pretty harsh, but I mean, just put yourself in those shoes, you know. It's difficult, but even Jesus says, anyone who asks you to give to them, that we should give. And I'm not trying to say that as a point of conviction, because I can't tell you how many times I've been on the side of the road driving and there's someone homeless there and I didn't give them anything. But it's a point of conviction of we're called to love people, and that seems so easy. All of us probably, if we were asked outside of church, hey, are you a loving person? Yeah, I mean, I love my mom, and, you know, I hang out with my friends, and I love them, and I love my boyfriend or girlfriend, and yeah, like I'm a loving person. But when it comes to the person who's spreading rumors about you at school, or when it comes to your ex, or when it comes to that one weird kid, if I were to look at you, would I be able to say that you're loving from your actions? Would I be able to determine that? Or would you have to try and convince me? Now, I really do not say this as a point of condemnation, but all of this brings up a significant point in that we're not very good at this. So I want to bring up something. I think I have a slide for it. I have a slide with something in Luke 10 underlined, but I want to point out what the lawyer actually said. So when we see the lawyer come up to Jesus, at first it says that he's coming up to test him. And so we can assume that he was going up to Jesus and with his deception and going, how can I trick Jesus to say something bad? And I'm sure what his plan was to say, Jesus, how do I inherit eternal life? And Jesus was going to say something that doesn't agree with all the Pharisees, and therefore he was going to find a way to condemn him and get him off. But instead, Jesus uses his own law against him and says, what does your law say? And so he was stumped there. And so I love the way that it says this. But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, and who is my neighbor? I have the Greek word, and I want to point that out to you, if we could get that up there. So the Greek, I think it's like dika o or something like that. It's weird. It's not u. I figured that out. But this is the word in Greek that is used for justify. He wanted to justify himself. And it says to show, exhibit, evince one to be righteous, such as he is and wishes himself to be considered. So the point that I'm trying to get at is we can see that what Jesus is doing is pointing out to this guy who, I think if you look at him from face value, it seems to be pretty arrogant. What is the main thing that he's saying? He's saying, Jesus gets him to say, you need to love the Lord your God with all your heart and to love your neighbor as yourself. Do this and you shall live. And so I can imagine, of course we don't know this for sure, but I can imagine when Jesus said that to the lawyer goes and thinks in his mind a few of the times that he maybe wasn't very loving. Maybe that one time he cussed out the Samaritan or something like that. And so trying to justify himself, trying to prove, okay, I'm supposed to love everyone, but I know I haven't loved certain people. Well, who's my neighbor? You know, maybe he thought maybe Jesus just meant Jewish people. Maybe he just meant his friends. Maybe he just meant the people that lived close to him, his family. But I love how Jesus then goes, that's when he shows him, no, you can't justify yourself. None of us can justify ourselves. We can't look at God and say, but God, I love my mom. Let me in. I'm good, right? I love my dad. He's great. No, because that's not what we're called to. And so Jesus then responds, of course, with the whole thing we just read. Then the main point, this condemns us. And I've said a few times that this should not be a message of condemnation, but there's a great distinction that I love to point out and that the scripture does time and time again, and it's the distinction of the law and the distinction of the gospel. And the idea here is that when we see a passage like this, where a man tries to justify himself, and Jesus doesn't go, you know what, you're right, you got it, bro. He instead expounds and shows him, this is where you've messed up. You know, you haven't done what I've called you to do, which is just simply to love. That's a problem that we face. Like, what do we do with that? Because if the answer to inheriting eternal life, as Jesus said, is to love God with all my heart, to love God with all my strength and all my soul, all my mind, and to love my neighbor as myself, and I can't do that on my own, what do I do? And of course, I think you could all know where I'm going with this, but I want to show you how the Good Samaritan also points out exactly what Jesus does to us in that situation. And so we see that there's a man, and he's wounded and he's lying in the street, and someone comes, the Good Samaritan, and he finds him in his despair, and he picks him up, and he takes him to the inn, and he heals him, and he cleans him, and he does everything that he needs done. That's pretty awesome. The Good Samaritan did a good job. But I have a chart here, and I want to point out to you how Jesus Christ is the better, truer, greater version of the Good Samaritan. So we see the Good Samaritan helped a man whose misery was caused by others. It's not the man walking's fault that he was robbed. Evil was done to him. He was half dead and wounded because of other people. But yet Jesus not only helps those who maybe have been hurt by others, but Jesus helps those who put themselves into terrible situations. And I don't want to downplay the fact that I'm sure a lot of us in this room can say that there's been times when other people have really wronged us. But let's be honest here. I mean, when it comes to sin, all of us choose to sin all the time. That's not, no one's coercing me to sin. I choose to sin. And when we sin, as we know from elsewhere in the scripture, in the book of Romans, it says that the wages of sin is death. When you work, you earn wages. When you sin, you're earning death. That's something that we all do. Jesus helps us even though we are the ones who put us there. He's greater than the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan helped a man who was wounded and half dead. Jesus Christ helps people who are completely dead in sin and trespass. And I get, especially as we're at our age, because I mean, we're not far in age at all. It doesn't seem as bad to be dead in sin as I'm sure most of us in this room would say, I'd rather be where I'm at, dead in sin, than like literally physically beaten and half dead on the side of the road. But in the grand scheme of life, it is worse to be dead in sin than it is to be wounded and half dead on the side of the road. And the Good Samaritan took the man who was wounded, and he bound up his wounds with oil and wine and put him on his animal and took him to the inn. And that's awesome. But Jesus takes people who are dead, and he doesn't just help them pick their wounds up and put Band-Aids on and cover up with gauze tape. Jesus literally takes dead people and raises them to life. He takes dead people and gives them new life. It says in his word, 2 Corinthians 5:17, that if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has gone, the new has come. That's way better. That's way better. Jesus Christ is better than the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan helped a Jew with whom there was some racial tension. There was some enmity between the Jew and the Samaritan. I don't want to downplay that. Again, like we said earlier, like the Samaritan should have been the least likely person to help this Jew. I mean, these Jews hated Samaritans. There was conflicts, there was attacks, all this verbal slander, which is exactly why when Jesus helps the Samaritan woman earlier in the book of John, it's so weird to the disciples and stuff like that. But Jesus Christ, and this point may seem weird, but he helps sinners who by loving the world naturally hate him. And I'm sure no one, even non-Christians, I mean, and maybe besides people who outwardly hate Christianity, no one is going to say, oh, I hate God, just because they don't believe in him. But the book of James tells us that love for the world puts us at enmity with God. Why? Because God has said, hey, these things are good, and they're not just boring. These are things that literally are good for you. It's good to love people. It's good to abstain from pornography. It's good to abstain from drugs. It's good to abstain from alcohol. But we don't care. Let's be honest. We do all those things. I'm no different. I mean, I've spent years doing some dark things. And when we do that, we're not thinking, oh, I hate God when I do this, but we're thinking, I love the world. I love what God says is not good for me. I love to do whatever I want. I hate to do what God tells me to do. I hate opening that's what I thought. I hate going to church. I hate reading my Bible. That's so boring. That's for weird people. I want to go party and stuff like that. So I may not have been able to admit it, but I hated God in that sense. I was at enmity with God. But Jesus Christ, when he looks at us and he sees us and he sees that we hate him, he does not go, I hate you too. He does what the Good Samaritan does, but to an even greater degree. He looks at us and he goes, you hate me, I love you so much that I will die for you. There was not a single person on earth who was completely in love with God when Jesus died. Every single person that he died for was at enmity with him. And this is this is great news. Jesus fulfills this perfectly. So when we see this law that condemns us, when we see Jesus saying, I need you to love God with all your heart, and I need you to love your neighbor as yourself, that will inherit you eternal life. And we turn around and we say, I can't do that. Like, Jesus, what do? I don't love people all the time. There's people that I dislike. This person made this rumor about me. I don't like them for that. This person said this to me. I don't like them for that. Or maybe they didn't even do something to me. This person's in the position that I want to be. They're the leader. I should be the leader. I'm more well-equipped than they are. I hate that. He doesn't look at us with contempt. He doesn't look at us with enmity that we give to him. He looks at us with love. I have a quote here. Us interns have been reading from a book called Gentle and Lowly. And there's an old Puritan guy. His name is Thomas Goodwin. He says, "The greater the misery is, the more is the pity when the party is beloved." So in modern English, the greater our misery is, the more the pity is when we, the party, are loved by God. Now, of all the miseries in the world, sin is the greatest. And so if we take that logically, the more the pity is, the more the misery is, the more we're loved. Now, of all miseries, sin is the greatest. So when we sin, we're in the greatest misery. Therefore, we draw out the most love from God. His affections shall be the more drawn out to you, and this as much when you lie under sin as under any other affliction. Therefore, fear not. The more we sin, not because God is okay with sin, but because he loves us so much, the more we sin, the more drawn to us God is. And the great illustration from this book is that imagine that you're a parent and your kid is sick. Just because your kid is sick and gross and dirty does not mean you don't want to go near them and you're like this to them. In fact, the sicker that they get, the more worried you are for them, the more pity you have on them, the more love you have for them. That's the same thing that God does for us. And we should respond so much differently because he has every right. I mean, imagine you're God. You set all these great things for your people. You create your people, and they just, screw that. I'm done. I want to do what I want to do. And then he responds by loving us and dying for us. It does not make sense. We need him. So when we see the condemnation of these things, some of the things that Jesus says that are hard, we don't need to look with fear. We need to look with reverence and love and thankfulness for his forgiveness. When he went to the cross, every time that you sin, past, present, future, it was put upon him, and he bore it for you. He fulfilled that, remember the law I've been talking about, to love God and to love people? He fulfilled that perfectly. He loved God with all his heart. I mean, he is God, but also think about all the times he took his time to pray to the Father. And he loved people with all his heart. How many people did he heal? How many people did he rectify? When Peter denied him 3 times, he reinstated him 3 times. I mean, Jesus loved people to the max. And it didn't always look conventional, but it was the truest form of love we've ever seen. And because of that, we can rest assured that his righteousness, when it was put on the cross and nailed there and killed, when it was sacrificed, that it was a good enough sacrifice. It was more than good enough. It was perfect. The perfect sacrifice was laid there on the cross. And now that he's resurrected, it's proof that that gets put to us. There's a big word, imputation. So I want you to think of if I have, some Skittles, and I give them to Landon, I'm imputing my Skittles to Landon. So Jesus does that exact same thing with us, with his righteousness. He fulfilled every law, every prophet, everything written in the Bible, he fulfilled it. He dies, he lays it down, and now when we put our faith in him, he imputes it to us. You get to walk around not in pride, but with joy, saying, I pretty much have the righteousness of Christ because of nothing I've done, nothing I deserve, but because he's freely given it to me. You're saved by grace through faith, and this is apart from works, lest any man should boast. You have been saved by grace alone. And this is just such a good reality. He is the Good Samaritan. One little personal story I wanted to bring up was how being a Good Samaritan actually does make an impact on your life. I'm sure some of you have heard my testimony and stuff like that, but for a long time, I was not following Christ or anything close to that. I was doing absolutely whatever I wanted to. And I've been at this church since I was in 3rd grade. And there was quite a while where I didn't come here, but before that, right before I left, there was also quite a while where I was here causing a lot of disruption and a lot of chaos, and in a blaze like this, I'd be back there with my friends, distracting every single person in this room. But I remember back then, I've had a one-on-one sit-down with both Kirk, the lead pastor, and Chris Dillashaw about things that were going on in my life, and I bring that up to say, not like, oh, look at me, I got to sit with the pastor. In fact, back then, I hated it. I was so bored. I thought it was so stupid. But now I look back and I just remember man, these guys who don't really even know me are taking time out of their day to sit with the kid that literally disrupts their service just to show love in that sense. In that sense, you could say they were being a Good Samaritan not because they didn't like me or something like that, but because there was a little bit of enmity between, especially me and Chris. Me and Chris did not get along for a good while, but he still loved me. And it's just like, that was pretty cool. And so I can look back on that now and go, that's exactly what I want to do to other people. I mean, if there's even a single opportunity I get in my life to where there's someone who doesn't expect me to love them, I want to go out and love them, because that's exactly what I would want someone else to do for me. You all know the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I mean, that's a pretty similar rule as what we're talking about here. I mean, don't you want other people to do good to you? When you want something, don't you want someone else to give it to you when they have it and not tell you you can come back tomorrow or whatever? We want people to do good to us. So therefore, why wouldn't we do good to him or to them? So those are my main 2 points that I want everyone to take away from this night is your neighbor is every single person in this room, but also literally everyone at all time. In fact, I completely forgot to use this slide, but I'm going to bring it up. I have a slide here. It should be answer number 1. My question number 1 was, who is your neighbor? Everyone, literally every single person. We are called to love everyone. And I made it very concise for a reason. Like, I can't think of anyone who is not my neighbor. Like, nope, yeah, I can't think of anyone who's not my neighbor. So when you're walking in school and, I don't know, you see the kid that you don't like, or you see the person who spread rumors about you, I mean, we have the opportunity here to be different. We have the opportunity to, instead of spreading the rumors back, I don't know, maybe just be quiet. Don't be in drama. It's not that hard. We have so many opportunities. When you see a kid sitting here at a Blaze all by himself, oh my gosh, you could sit next to him. That would be really hard if you did that. You would actually have to move your body and talk with your mouth. That'd be really hard to do. But even, and I don't want to discount the people that we do love. It's not like Jesus was saying earlier we shouldn't love those who we love. Like, when there's dishes sitting in the sink, why not just do them for your mom or for your dad or for whoever? Why not just serve that person? It's good to love people. I'm telling you, the cliche of it's better to give than to receive is so true. I mean, this life is fleeting. Like, you could be the richest person in the world. That's not going to make you happy. You could have every single thing you want. This life is short. It's fleeting. So why not spend it doing what God has called us to do? It's not boring. It doesn't stink. It doesn't hurt to love people. It's good. And when we love others, what will that bring except them loving us back? It's so much easier to love people who love you. So you're going to have a way less of this problem of having to love people who don't like you if you're just more loving. So that's free game right there. No more drama if you just love people perfectly. So just be perfect. I'm just kidding. Okay, that didn't get any laughs. So thanks, guys. And then, just to reiterate that second point, we're bad. Like, we stink. But isn't it so good that Jesus has done it for us? Isn't it so good that we do not have to live our lives, man, I haven't done enough good today. Isn't it so good that when we get in our room, going to bed at night, and we're looking back and reflecting on the day, and I'm like, man, I was a freaking jerk to my mom today. That my response doesn't have to be self-hatred. My response doesn't have to be, I'm terrible. My response gets to be, man, thank God through Jesus Christ that he has done all the work for me, that there's nothing else that I need to do to be righteous in his eyes. It's so good. And so I'm just going to pray us out real quick, and we're going to head to life group. Thank y'all for listening so much. So, dear Lord Jesus, I just thank you so much, Lord, for this truth. God, I thank you for how you taught us who our neighbor is, Lord. I thank you that that's so relevant to our life today, Lord. As we look around and there's all these tensions, whether it's tension between people of different races or tension between people of different belief systems, God, we see from your parable, Jesus, from your own mouth, that our calling, our duty, first and foremost, is to love them, Lord, to love them as ourself. You said, love your neighbor as yourself. So God, I just pray that, God, would you let your church, and specifically this group right here, God, would you let them walk in that, Lord? I pray at their schools that they would be the reason why the people who don't believe in God would say, those Christian people aren't judgmental. They aren't horrible people. They aren't exclusive. They aren't mean. They smile at me when I walk by. When I speak evil of them, they respond with blessing and with praise and with prayer. I pray that we would live out your word that says, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, bless those who mistreat you. I pray that we would be different, Lord. Our world is not going to change by responding to hatred with hatred, God. And we've seen that throughout your word and just throughout history time and time again. God, our world is only going to change when we respond in love. And so I pray that you would help us respond in love. And God, I thank you that when we're inadequate at that, when we don't do good enough, when we don't love well enough, that we don't have to look at ourselves and go, man, I'm doomed. I have no way out. I can't do this thing that God has called me to do because you did it for us, Jesus. And you gave us all your righteousness and you give us all your love. I thank you that the deeper in sin that we are, the more drawn to us you are, Lord. That is your heart. The deeper I am in sin, the closer Jesus is to me. The deeper you are in pain, the closer Jesus is to you. In his word, it says that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted. So God, I thank you for that truth. I pray that you would just bless our life groups, God. Help us to have fruitful conversation and focus for just a little bit before we get to do some fun stuff. And yeah, I pray all these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.